This is To the Front. Tools for today's top agents.
Maybe you've heard this phrase. Maybe it was a coach told you. Maybe it was a business advisor. Heck, maybe it was even one of your spouse. A spouse said this: if you're not growing, you're dying. Have you heard that phrase? Or if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. In other words, there really is no middle ground when talking about anything that you want to achieve in life, whether it's your business, whether it's a relationship, whatever it is that maybe this is the best word for it. Complacency kills. In fact, hey, welcome to episode number 16 of To the Front. And that's going to be our topic for today as we try to help businesses, as we try to help you take the next step forward. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. And hey, you don't want to hear from me. In fact, today's guest, I've been so excited since day one of the To the Front podcast. I've wanted to bring on my friend, Alex Shattuck. And so I'm going to bring Al on right now. Al, welcome to the podcast, man. Glad you're here.
I'm happy to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Hey, I've known Al for a few years now as we've launched FrontRunner and as his other company and we've been working together some. Phenomenal leader. I want to introduce you to Al. If you've been hiding under a rock and you don't know who Al is, he is a 12-year captive agent, doesn't have one office, has not two. He's got 3 offices, a really big, powerful team. Amazing coach and speaker. Almost every event that I go to, I look at the speaker lineup. Al, you're on the speaker lineup every time. Sometimes I don't get to hear you, but I got to hear you back at Soaring Eagle in January. Powerful stuff. In fact, I've got a notebook that's just filled with all your notes. I'm probably going to say something that you said and claim it as mine. So I'm going to tell you, I apologize in advance, man, for that. But not only is he a great captive agent, also the president and CEO of Autopilot Recruiting. We're going to talk about that here on the episode. But even more important than that, Al has served our country incredibly, both here and overseas. He was in the Iraq War, in battle there. And I'm going to ask Al some questions on that. Because when we talk about complacency kills, it might not be any more true than when you're fighting for our country. And so we're going to talk about that. So Al, awesome, man. Glad to have you. How'd I do? Anything you want to add to that?
No, you nailed it. I think I'll probably get into this, but I'm married with 4 kids, and so when I'm not doing all the other stuff you mentioned, I stay pretty busy with the family too. But no, you nailed it, my friend.
Four. Tell us the ages of your kids.
18, 16, 14, and 12.
18, 16, 14, and 12. See, those are spaced like a proper family should space them. Dude, I have a 17-year-old and a 3-year-old. So we didn't plan this right? There's no consistency in our life, but you did it right, my friend. I don't know how to do it.
I like to take credit for that, but 50% were planned, 50% were not. So we won't go into detail which ones you probably guess. But
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
50% planned, 50% not. I like it. So, well, hey, we talked a little bit early on already about your business, your agency, but tell me a little bit about your agency. You know, I know you've been in 12 years, but tell the folks that are listening or that are catching this on YouTube a little bit more about where you're at, maybe a bit about your team, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'll rewind a little bit. I started in the industry back in 2009. I worked for a local agent and I was a team member for pushing 3 years before I took the plunge into taking on my own agency. And my first one was a traditional assignment in a small town called Owasso, Michigan. All 3 of my agencies are in Michigan, by the way. Had some success with that, obviously, and went on to launch a scratch agency, new market opportunity in a town called DeWitt. And just to put this into perspective, I don't know if how many people are actually watching the video, but if you see the Michigan hand here, right there in the middle, right there you go. Right there. Owasso is between Lansing and Flint. DeWitt's just north of Lansing. And then Rockford, my 3rd agency, is over on the west side, kind of near Grand Rapids, just north of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we're spread out quite a bit. It's been going well. My teams collectively, in total, you're looking at probably 25 is about where I run. That will vary, of course, when you have a team that size. Some come and go. Some of those are part-time, some of those are remote. And we do have some specialization when it comes to financial services and some admin work. But for the most part, we have a service team and a sales team. The majority of my sales team are multiple line representatives. So they're selling across all core product lines. And just always looking for the next best person to add to my team.
So 25 in your agencies, plus you way more than that for Autopilot.
Yeah, Autopilot Recruiting, we have about 150 on our team.
Goodness gracious.
Quite a few.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously to have that kind of thing, 3 different offices, but multiple businesses, probably other businesses that we aren't even talking about. So you got to have some pretty strong leadership. Some folks
strong
that
leadership and really good people. You can be a great leader if you have bad people. It's not gonna. You need both. You got to be able to lead. You got to be able to empower people to be leaders, and you have to be able to recruit really phenomenal people and then retain phenomenal people. And those are 2 different things.
Oh no, totally. You got to get them, then you got to keep them. Right. So there's probably a culture piece to that. There's a self-leadership. How are you as a leader? In fact, this is not part of what I want to talk about today, but I think it's important to note is that I've seen a lot of business leaders who recruit great people, yet can't keep them. And the finger always points to the other people. But when you look at it, the common denominator is them. That's the common denominator. So the question is, how do we look inside of ourselves and say, all right, if I'm getting great people, I can't keep them. Maybe I need to look at me. But that's another topic for another day. But hey, Al, one of the first times that I knew of you it was a couple years ago or something. Somebody handed me a book called Complacency Kills, and it was your book. And I put it on my nightstand, and I just picked it up and I started reading a little bit every night. And I found myself every night actually reading a little bit more because it was really, really powerful. And there's a backstory to that book. And so I was hoping as we kick off the topic about if you're not growing, you're dying, if you're not going forward, you're going backward. Could you tell us a little bit about the backstory of that book, how it came to be, maybe a part of the backstory where you first heard of that principle, that complacency kills?
Yeah, of course. To do that, I have to take you back to Iraq, which you already mentioned before. And you, just guessing, are probably in my age range. And I think anybody that's our age and above are probably pretty familiar with Fallujah, Iraq.
Yeah.
If you're in your 20s, maybe not so much. If you're in your late 30s, 40s, and beyond, you probably remember that was one of those locations where if you had someone that you love in the military, you didn't want him or her to end up there. And that's where I ended up. It was Fallujah, Iraq. This is 2006, and I went into 2007. And going back here, just to give you an idea of kind of what we were dealing with at this time, it was a world, as you can imagine, that was just wildly crazy different from what we get to experience here at home. The building that we occupied, where we live, we couldn't even step outside of the building to use the porta-john or the shower trailer without having a full flak jacket on, Kevlar helmet on, our weapon on us, of course, but also a magazine inserted and around in the chamber. And that was just to use the restroom or take a shower.
Wow.
And from there, when we go outside of the wire on patrol, whether it be on foot or in a Humvee, mounted patrol, we had to really, really make sure we were on point, because it was just one of those locations in Iraq where we had to deal with RPGs, roadside bombs, small arms fire, to include sniper rounds. There were kids that would throw grenades. We had to worry about mortars even while we were, housed where we were. So it's just the threat was constant. There was never really a time where you could just take that deep breath and breathe. You're just always on edge, always on your A game and alert. You had to be, which was a lot. But once in a while, they would send us to a larger base outside of the city, and typically this was to get resupplied. So we'd go out there and to get resupplied, and once we crossed over those tall walls with the armed guards to this much bigger base outside of the city, we were fairly in a safe space. Right now, we would still get mortared periodically, but for the most part, we felt pretty good about our chances. We would take off our flak jacket, take off our helmet, unload our weapons, and just breathe for a few minutes. We would eat some real food. They had a great chow hall. It was awesome, so we loved that. They had working phones and working internet, so we could call home for the first time, check our email for the first time in a while in most cases. But after we did all that and got our supplies or whatever, we'd have to gear back up and load up and start making our way back to the exit, the same way we came from, right? And once we got up to that tall wall with the armed guards, one of the last things that we would see was a spray painted image. And it wasn't unique just to that base. This was all over Iraq. And so if you're a veteran listening, you're like, yeah, I'm familiar, man. This is
Know
not
that.
I came up with. This is not something that was unique to Fallujah. But I never forgot that image. It was a skull and the two words "Complacency Kills," very much so like the one you're looking at in my flag behind me and the logo on my hat, and the book right there. It's something very comparable to that, just spray painted up on the barrier there, the wall there, to make sure that as we left, as we exited those walls, we understood that it's game time. You know, it was back to the real world, back to that world where you couldn't let your guard down. If you did, it'd be devastating for you and those around you. And it was, again, that final reminder that complacency kills. And then, you know, I was fortunate enough, you fast forward, you know, to the later spring in 2007, I make it home. I'm fortunate enough to make it home in one piece and meet my daughter for the first time. She was born when I was overseas. And then time started to go by, and then years started to go by. And after a handful of years, I started to realize that I was getting rather complacent in a lot of different areas in my life here at home.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me that, you know, those experiences that we had, the success that we had, and the struggles, everything that we've been through, that I've been through, none of it I was really leveraging or using in a positive way here at home. If anything, it might have been counterproductive, some of those experiences that I had overseas.
Oh, sure.
At home. But then that skull and the two words, "Complacency Kills," that came back. And I started thinking about that message more and more. And I decided I was going to try to apply that mindset here at home. Take that brutal lesson that we learned overseas, apply it here at home, and then just see what happens. And what I found, over the years, you know, looking back on it now, I realized that complacency doesn't just kill in the war zone. Complacency kills here at home too. It kills our finances.
Yeah.
It kills our health. It kills our relationships. And you better believe, for all the listeners out there, complacency can and will kill your business also. And so that's where that message comes from. And that's why I feel it's still very, very relevant to me today, my business today, and just the success that we've had here in Michigan. I can attribute back to that mindset for sure.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I get chills every time I listen to that story. One is, you know, in 2006, I don't know how old I am, maybe 25, something like that. Maybe I was 25. I don't know. I'm mid 40s now, but, you know, I remember the men going over, you know, to fight. Right? I mean, we were just a few years past 9/11, and the amount of sacrifice that took. But I remember watching the news and just seeing day after day after day, people being killed by IEDs, or they're getting caught in, you know, a gunfire, or whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of people that went home and they went over there and they didn't come home like they went over. And, you know, we have to assume that some of it, obviously there's nothing they could do about that. Right. But there's maybe a piece of it that says, hey, even in war zones, even in places that are dangerous, it could be easy to let our guard down. It could be easy to say, you know, I get complacent. Sometimes bad things happen. Man, that's a powerful story. Thank you for saying, hey, thank you for serving, Al. You know, I don't want to miss that moment to say thank you to somebody that did something for us to keep freedom going, man. So I want to definitely say that, man. We're grateful for you. But do me a favor. If you could define complacency in like a sentence or two, how would you define the word complacency? Because I bet you we all have different working definitions of it, but if you had to define it.
You know, I've shared a message around complacency with kids, and you know, how do you communicate this to teenagers, you know, middle schoolers, and what I came up with, and I didn't come up with it. We've all heard this story, but I think it best describes complacency, and it's that whole story about the frog in the boiling water, right? You can they say if you put a frog in room temperature water, he's just gonna, you know, hang out. He's all good there. But if you drop him into boiling water, he's going to immediately jump out, right? Because he sees that threat, immediately understands this isn't for me. This is bad stuff. I'm going to get out of this hot water. And he hops his green ass out, right? But then you put him back in the room temperature water and you start just to slowly bring that temperature up, you know, turn the burner on and get that thing slowly but surely getting hotter and hotter and hotter. By the time that he realizes that he's got a problem, he's already cooked. That's how I would describe complacency to most, because there's a lot of definitions. The actual definitions pretty lengthy, but really just like not understanding the the dangers around us. That's a big part of that definition.
It's a great way to describe it. That's maybe translated over to business. That's, hey, everything's business was going great. It was fine. We found our way. We kind of had a little success. And the next time I looked up, I was a P&L loser for the year. And then I looked up again and my team's morale dropped through the basement floor. And all of a sudden now I'm looking at trying to figure out how am I going to make payroll. And it wasn't like this 4 years ago. It wasn't like this 5 years ago. So I think that's a great way to define complacency. And I have to guess that the people that are listening today, whether it's on YouTube or, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, are either feeling that right now or they felt it in the past. Maybe they haven't felt it, but maybe they've got a friend who's like that. Because one thing that I know, Al, you probably agree, that business owners kind of group together. I want to hang out with like-minded people. I'm sure that you do as well. And so a lot of my friends, a lot of people that I hang out with are entrepreneurs and they're doing multiple things. And so I've had buddies that I would consider complacent. And nothing really changes about their process. And maybe they've been in the business for 10 years or, but they're just kind of in a slump. And they're saying, man, why aren't yesterday's wins good enough for today? So I guess my question is, why is it easy to slide into that as business? Or why is it easy as the frog? Just sort of stay right there. And before you look up, you're in trouble. Why is it that it's so easy for a business, for an insurance agency to become complacent? Because I think sometimes you can look up and you've not grown for a couple of years. In fact, maybe you've gone back a little bit. And why does it sneak up on people is my question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for a number of reasons. And I don't know if I guess it could be all of the above. It could be one in particular, but several that come to mind for me when it comes to probably most businesses, insurance specifically, though. The first one I think about is the money and the revenue that an agent can create and the residual money that an agent can create. It's really easy to, like, first off, the barrier to entry into the insurance industry is very, very low. Doesn't mean because you get in, you're going to make a boatload of money doing it, but the bar is fairly low to make a pretty darn good living in this industry. And so when you build up, a sizable book of business to the point where you can live residually off the book of business that you've built or partially been handed to in some cases, I think that we can start to justify things like, if you're making that, whatever that number was, that was probably your number. It's easy to say, why would I work that much harder to get to that next level when this is more money than I would have been making anywhere else anyway? And so there's part of it, just the comfort level, being overly comfortable in the income levels that we have at the time. I think that's sometimes how it starts. I think another way that it can also start is doing the same things over and over for years, if not decades, and not being in a situation to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
So you get really, again, comfortable and complacent. You get a little bored. You start looking for other things. You start looking for, either whether it's on the golf course or maybe side hustles even. But I think when you're in the insurance industry, your insurance agency needs to be your main hustle. It needs to be your main focus, and most likely that's what's going to drive most of your revenue. And so we get sidetracked thinking, well, I got to go take on this new thing. It's like, well, no, there's things you can still do within your agency to grow it and redevelop it, whether it be a second agency, a third agency, or just building out better processes and systems and adding better people. There's usually things you can do to reinvent yourself. And I've even found that if I don't find something new every 5 years or so, like, I get a little bored too. But that's where I think that multiple agent opportunity is tremendous, or multiple office opportunity. And then the last thing that comes to mind, and I think it's kind of a byproduct of the first two, is agents wake up one day and they're not really qualified to do much more than what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were necessarily started that way. But when you take your foot off the gas and you stop, focusing on the business, you stop developing yourself as a leader and as an employer and as whatever else you need to develop yourself as, you wake up in 5 years or 10 years and everybody else kept moving. The systems kept changing. The world is still, a much different place than where it was. And you got to all of a sudden try to figure some stuff out. And some will and some won't. I would say most can. And so that's not necessarily a negative message that, like, hey, if you've taken your foot off the gas for 5 or 10 years, you're not qualified anymore to grow and reach that next level. In fact, you are. You just got to dig in and play catch up a little bit.
That's
And,
right.
that would be my words of encouragement to anybody that's feeling that right now. Like, man, did it pass me? Is it too late? And the answer is absolutely not. I've seen it time and time again. Adam, you probably have too, where agents, really fell off for a long time. Sometimes it was intentional. They were focusing on other things, and now they want to flip that switch back on. I've seen it. It's rare. It is rare, but it can be done. And I believe everybody listening can do it.
That's right, man. That's encouraging, because it's not like, oh man, I messed up. Now I'm cooked. No, I mean, you can't go back and change the future, but you can create a new tomorrow, right? I mean, you can say, okay, starting today, I'm not going to focus on where I messed up or I took my foot off the gas. I'm going to choose today to reengage. And Al, you're right. Whether it's through, Front Runner or working with some of our other partners, I've seen agents who put their foot back on the pedal because they found sort of this diminishing returns of the residual income. It kind of starts going off, and before you look up, you're in a spot that you don't want to be. So I think that's super powerful to say. Help me to kind of balance something for me, if you don't mind. When I think about complacency in business, I think about, back to my day. So I not only am I a part owner of Front Runner, I also own a couple of print shops, Al, and I'm actually in my print shop today filming. And this is a business I bought 2.5 years ago. We've got 2 locations. It's a Minuteman Press, so we do all kinds of stuff, right? But I walked in 2.5 years ago, and it was a 3-year P&L loser. Did about $350,000 a year. Really in a tough place. Really in a tough place. And the owners, great people. I mean, really fantastic, salt of the earth people you love to go and have nachos and a margarita with. But they don't own the business for almost 40 years. And the foot was not only off the gas pedal, they weren't even in the car. But the business had incredible opportunity. And so I didn't know printing. I didn't know it, but I do know marketing and people. And so I came in, I thought it was just going to be a side investment. I said, oh man, I got to put my hand to the plow, so to speak here. All we did was we just started tracking stuff. We just put up on the board, how much of all these things are we going to do? Because that's what Front Runner does. It helps agencies track. And so I said, well, maybe I can help a print shop track. Well, 2.5 years later, we wake up and it's not 300,000. We did 1.5 million last year, so 1.52 million. So we've quadrupled our growth, and nothing special, just by saying I'm ready to reengage. That's it. I'm just going to track. I'm just going to do something to actively look at my business. And so what you said, I'm played out in my print business. Certainly, it's going to play out in an insurance agency all day. But help me balance these 2 words: contentment and complacency. What's the difference, right? Because when I say, are you content? My hope is that an agent would be able to say, I'm content, but I'm not complacent. But I think sometimes those words kind of because I think the opposite is also true, is that to live a life of discontent all the time is not fulfilling either. So how do you be content with the growth and the wins that you see, but then say, I'm not going to be content. I'm not going to be complacent. So help me balance those 2 things, if you would.
Yeah, maybe I should have you balance those 2 things for me, because I don't know. You have people on here to speak and share, and I know that part of what the audience wants to hear is the answers to questions, but sometimes they want the truth too.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to give you the truth, and I don't understand how to get there. I haven't gotten there yet. The discontent or being content. I've never been good at that. And I think it's been beneficial in a lot of areas of my business. It's probably been not beneficial in some areas of my life. So it's a work in progress for me. But one thing that I am is I'm grateful. I might not be content very often, but I'm grateful. And those are 2 different words.
Yeah.
I don't understand how to get the content piece. I'm working on that. Let me know if you have an answer. But I can.
I asked you.
What's that?
I said, I asked you.
Okay. Well, we'll have to bring on somebody else for the next call, because I don't know if we're going to get that out of us today, but I think you can have a problem with being content and not quite have that figured out yet, but still wake up and be grateful. And so that is something that I do feel that even if I'm not feeling the most content, because I enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy like reaching for the next level and keeping score and doing all those things, winning, as much as I can in most areas that I can. But that doesn't mean I'm not grateful for what we've accomplished, what I've
Yeah.
accomplished, for the lifestyle we've been able to live, and all that. Like I am, I'm just not content. That's the reality.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that that's okay to be that way, and I'm sure that many that are content are not necessarily complacent. I'm sure that's the case, that just because you're content doesn't mean you're complacent. I just think you got to be careful, because I think that I don't know if there's really a fine line where you go from one to the other. I think it's probably a slippery slope. I think you can probably get to that point of feeling content and wake up down the road and realize, no, you became complacent. And so, making sure you're always asking yourself that question:
Yeah.
am I being content right now, or am I being complacent and lazy?
Wow.
Which one is it?
Boy, that's a great way to phrase it. Am I being content or am I being complacent? I actually almost feel like you could start every day asking yourself that question, and it would probably reap huge rewards. Also, this grateful piece, I think you're onto something with it, is that if I learn to be grateful that if for some reason I were to pass away today, the world wouldn't owe me anything else. I'm a big believer in that personally, right? Like I want to live my life in such a way that if today were my last day, I want to say, man, you know what? I wasn't owed anything else. I left it all on the field, right? I was grateful for everything. I'm actually going to spend next week. I'm going to spend in Guatemala, kind of part mission trip, part business type thing, and I'm sure you experienced the same thing in Iraq, and watching the way people live and watching the struggle and the poverty, right? Like, man, we got a lot to be grateful for. We sure do. And we can let that gratefulness power us to not be content, to not be complacent, right? Because it's our job to figure out how to push the ball forward. And man, that's powerful. Al, I want to say something. One of the things that I've loved about you and your team is that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with them, both your individual team, your upper managers, both from your agency and from Autopilot. And hey, man, I got to tell you, it's crazy. They all beat to the same sort of drum here. They're like mini versions of you as power. So my guess is that's not an accident. My guess is that's probably part of the DNA and culture. I know there's different personalities and those kinds of things, but they're all driven. They're all passionate. They all know what they're going after. So I guess my question is, we're talking about complacency kills, and let's get this a ground level. Are there some nuggets either from your book or from your time in Iraq in the military that you're applying in your agency right now? So what are some of those little things that you're doing to say, all right, if complacency kills, we're going to do some things to counteract that? So what are you doing in your businesses?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things is something you already talked about. And I'm going to get back to the recruiting, I know, in a minute, so I'll skip over that piece of it for now. But really, doing a really good job of keeping score in all the areas that matter. You probably heard me share my story about my family and I going to Texas Roadhouse, and how I used to just like eat an ungodly amount of the buns and the cinnamon butter and the
Yeah.
peanuts. And one day I Googled how many calories I was consuming, and I think a half a dozen rolls and a cup of peanuts was like 1,220 calories, if my memory is correct. And so I realized I was eating a full meal worth of calories before my meal. Then I'd eat my meal too. And what that did is it changed my behavior. I started, I stopped eating that many. I might have one, maybe two, but I wasn't having six. I was laying off the peanuts for the most part. And so that's just an example of when you're being monitored or tracked, like it's going to change your behavior for the better. And so we really do a good job of using Front Runner and other tools that are provided for us to make sure that we're tracking all the things that we need to track to take this agency or these agencies in the right direction. And the second part of that, though, is something that we've improved over the last 6 months, more so than before. And it's not just because tracking, like, you can keep score, but if you're not watching game film, you're probably not getting a whole heck of a lot better. It's helping,
Right.
but not as much as actually keeping score and then watching the game film. And so we've done a much better job of keeping score, reporting it out to the team, but also like meeting with the team and asking those tough questions of what got in the way when it came to activity. And when we started doing that consistently, going from Q3 to Q4, everything everything went up. Our average quotes provided went up. Our average call volume went up. Our average close ratio went up. Our production for raw new business went up. And the only thing, this is through, seasonality, through Thanksgiving, Black Friday, New Year's,
Wow.
all that, Christmas. We had our best quarter because we started holding people more accountable. And that's not like that word can scare people. We were just talking about the results, asking where we can, what got in the way, what we can do to help them. And that was led by my office manager, Corey, which I know you know well.
Yeah.
And so yeah, keeping score and talking about it.
Wow. What gets tracked, gets evaluated. Now, it's impossible to evaluate your team if you don't know the numbers, and that's powerful. So, because I know a lot of people are like, well, it's easy for Al Shattuck to say that. He's got 3 successful agencies, a growing business, incredible leaders. And what I'm hearing from you tell me if I'm wrong, is that a big piece of that recipe is just knowing the data, is just knowing the numbers, is tracking, it's keeping some sort of a scorecard. And it doesn't need to be oppressive or, time intensive, but just let's talk about the little things every day that it takes to win. And if we focus on making those little things better, the overall end product is going to be better. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if you have clear goals and expectations around activity, not necessarily just results, but activity to get there. I always say success is a choice. And when it comes to sales, if you need to make 20 calls to get 1 quote and the goal is 4 quotes, you need to make 80 calls, 20 calls to get 1, 80 calls to get 4, close ratio at 25%. You're going to close 1 household a day, 1.5 cars, 1 point something fire. Hopefully you're tripping over some financial services through the month, and you end the month with, 30 raw new auto, 15, 20 fire, and few life, few health. It's a good month for most anybody, regardless of your market.
Right.
But if your team doesn't know exactly what they need to do to get there, and you haven't been tracking their activities, so you can coach them on that, because everybody's call to quote ratio is going to be different. Yours might be 10 to 1, mine might be 20 to 1, Corey's might be 30 to 1. And so we have to understand what their call to quote ratio is, so we can help coach them to that activity level, which will guarantee success based on the math, right? So it's hard, but it's not that difficult.
That's a good way to put it. It's hard, but it's not that difficult. It's really not. It's just saying, hey, I am going to re-engage myself in my business. If you're an agent, a business owner, no matter what it is, whether you have a lawn care business or whatever, doesn't matter. You're tracking something. There's some sort of a KPI in there that is like an early indicator of success. And so part of busting complacency, getting on board with the early indicators and holding people accountable to it, which is going to lead me to the next thing I want to say is that one thing I think you got to be prepared for. Agree with me, Al, if you want. But I don't think I'm wrong. One of the things that I found is that when I started keeping score, it became really apparent my champions and my folks that needed to go find work elsewhere. It was actually very difficult, right? Because when you don't track, it's really easy for your ineffective people to hide. It's really easy for those non-performers to sort of hide within the shadows because you're not really tracking anyway. And so if there's a problem, if there's something that's busting up your business, well, you're probably the offenders are hiding in the shadows of the untracking. I don't know if that's a word. I just made that up. The non-tracking, that's probably where they're hiding. But you start tracking, what's it going to do? It's going to put a light on. It's going to expose your business. And then you as a leader have to start making some choices. And those choices are these the right people for the business? It doesn't mean you start firing and cutting people left and right? But it does say, do I need to re-engage coaching? Do I need to help people? 2 podcast episodes ago, I talked about working people around the square and a great training process. But let's say in a perfect world, all those things are in place. You're now tracking, you've got people you need to go. So part of the hard part as a leader is to say, hey, listen, I need to help you find whatever's next for your life, because this is not it. So, which is where I want to shift now, is to Autopilot. And Autopilot is another organization that you founded, what was it, 7 years ago?
Not even 2021, September of 21.
Wow, dude, it's exploded on the scene then. Autopilot Recruiting. Certainly I know it focuses a lot on captive agents, but I know you guys recruit also for other businesses as well. So tell me a little bit about Autopilot, about helping businesses find the right people and about the whole process, because it's pretty interesting. My best friend in the world, Jason, uses Autopilot, stakes his whole business on it because there's a really interesting model behind it. So tell us a little bit about Autopilot and how it helps businesses.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'll start by just sharing that everything that we talked about so far can't happen without enough good people. You can track, you can train, you can spend, you can invest, you can do all these different things for your business, for your people. But if you don't have the right people or enough of the right people, you're never going to get to where you want to be, period. You really can't take someone that doesn't want to get better, that doesn't have the capacity to get better, and make them better. You can't just buy more leads or buy one more program. I do truly believe that every piece of my success in all my businesses started with the fact that I've always been committed to the recruiting process from a very early stage in my entrepreneurial career. And that's how this autopilot recruiting thing came to be. I didn't wake up one day and think, okay, what business can I start to make money? That wasn't, and I think a lot of businesses don't start that way. Like for me, I kept getting agents calling me. This is, going into the pandemic and early pandemic era of like, hey, what are you doing over there? Like your results are still great and this, that, and the other. And it always came down to the fact that my team's awesome. Like I have a really great team. And the next question naturally is, well, how are you getting these people? So I recruit every day. This is what I do. And I would go into detail. And then there was one day I got 3 calls in a row asking me about my recruiting process. And I thought, you know what? Maybe agents want to hear this and need to hear this. And so I crafted a PowerPoint, keynote type presentation. I started going around the country, preaching my message on recruiting. And that was good. I think I made an impact to a certain extent, but I realized over time is that most agents and business owners would rather outsource it. And I didn't realize that because I love recruiting. So I was like, man, I'm just going to tell them what to do. They're going to all go and do it. Right. Doesn't work that way. Right. It doesn't work that way with anything that I do outside of recruiting, basically. Too, right? I don't like to do everything. And so most agents, I kept hearing from them saying, hey, could you just refer me to somebody to do this for me? Do you know anybody or any business? And I said, I don't know. I don't. You just got to do what I told you to do. Then finally, I kept hearing that I'd rather just pay someone to do it statement. And I decided maybe I could do that for them. So I started recruiting for an agent out of San Antonio, Texas. She was my first agent, September of 21. I was doing that myself at first. And then I brought on a recruiter. I trained her to do what I've done for my agencies for the previous 9-10 years. And then I started assigning her agents. And then from there, I brought on another recruiter, more agents, another recruiter, and more agents. And then fast forward to today, we're knocking at the door of 1,900. We typically float around 1,900 insurance agents. And then, a handful of other industries, quite a few other industries across the board, small businesses primarily. And so that's where we are now. We have a team of about 150. And what you can expect when you're a customer of Autopilot Recruiting is that first if you're not already with an applicant tracking system, that is something we'll either provide for you or show you how to get it, depending on what industry and business you're coming from. From there, you're assigned a recruiter. So while you are assigned a recruiter and you start to get to know your recruiter through an introductory type call, we are working on the build out of your applicant tracking system to make sure we're optimizing that thing in a way to get as many organic applicants to flow through that applicant tracking system as humanly possible. Yeah. So we want to increase applicant flow in a major way. Have your recruiter start to work those applicants every single business day. So she's going to go in, she's going to check the resumes, she's going to check the assessments if applicable. She's going to schedule the phone screen. She's going to conduct the phone screens. Then based off of your capacity, what you're into, what your needs and wants are, she's going to make a decision. Is this candidate worth putting in front of Adam, yes or no? And wow. If it's no, she deactivates, sends an email. If it's a yes, she coordinates with the agent or the business owner a date and time to either meet in person in the office, outside the office, Zoom, what Teams, whatever they want to do. And then she's back to work, doing it again. She's in there again every single business day. She's recruiting for you. She's doing what she does in the applicant tracking system. She goes outside of there. We have a full offensive playbook to go play offense on your behalf outside of there to make sure we're delivering the results that we want to deliver. And it works. It works. I would say that the agents that are bought into our process on how and why we do what we do love it. The business owners that understand what we do, they love it. Yeah, that's the gist of it.
Well, and that's a recruiting service is not a new thing, but to me, the new thing, the reason why it's having such a huge impact on agents is that it doesn't stop. just because you feel like you filled your agency or your business, don't stop looking for good people. And so I can't tell you how many times I've spent. The last person we hired for Front Runner out, man, we had 800 applicants, 800. And I am just like muddying through all these applicants. And I definitely found the right one. So if you're listening, I found you're the right one. But how much easier would it have been if I had a company who says, hey, I know what you're looking for. I know what your wants, your needs are. These are the people. These are the people that, or this is a person I think that you ought to interview. And then I'll even help coordinate that first conversation. And then the amount of time that would save. In fact, one of the phrases that we say at Front Runner is that if I'm saving you time, really, I'm making you money. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, if you're an agent or business owner that's profitable, in most cases, this is going to make you a whole bunch of money on your time saved, whether it's you or someone that works for you. But more importantly, the talent that you bring in, that consistency piece. We find our best people when we don't have to find people. So it's not the desperate business owner that usually finds that amazing candidate. That will happen in time. But typically, once you get fully staffed, you can be more selective. But there's a lot of different ways to see an ROI with this service, right? Just the time that it takes when someone leaves to all of a sudden ramp it up and find the next one versus having a company that's already doing it for you every single day forever. It's an affordable way for business owners to actually check this box. Like your printing company, it's big enough now where maybe you could, but at least early on, like there's no way you're going to bring in an in-house HR person or recruiter.
Yeah, no way.
No way you're going to want to pay a headhunter, $20,000, $30,000 to place somebody. What we charge is hundreds of dollars a month, not thousands and thousands of dollars a pop. And so whether you hire 2 people this year or 22 people this year, we're not charging you anymore. So it's an affordable way for small businesses to finally win the talent war against the big dogs that we've been getting our ass kicked by for the last 10 years, quite frankly.
That's right. And I will tell you, for my buddy Jason's business, it's meant the world. He went from a one-man show, right? Just kind of a, it wasn't like a revolving door as much, but there was a little bit of that, to all of a sudden, every time that maybe somebody didn't work out, whatever, there was already a really qualified candidate ready to go. And then he's scaled up and up and up. And then his book in the last 2 years has doubled. His revenue has doubled. Now, maybe not the book, but the revenue has doubled in his agency. And a lot of that he's attributed to Autopilot Recruiting, because you'll have helped him find the right people. And so, man, if you're an agent out there and you're still on Indeed and all these other places, get off Indeed, quit. Your time, don't use your time like that. You need to engage Autopilot. I'm serious. I'm not just because I'm having Al on, because listen, I don't bring anybody on this podcast that I don't believe in. Won't do it, can't do it. But I deeply believe in Autopilot Recruiting. If you're on YouTube, you see the link below, autopilotrecruiting.com. If you're listening to this, it's just autopilotrecruiting.com. Al, is that the best way that they can get in contact with your team about engaging you all, or is there a different place that you want them to go?
No, that's probably the best place to, get information on the service itself, set up a demo call or watch the demo, whatever you prefer, whether you want to talk to a human or not, you have that option. And then if you just want to just get to know me more, I'm all over social media for the most part. So if you seek out Autopilot Recruiting on Facebook and Instagram, or just Alex Shattuck on Facebook and Instagram, you'll see a little bit about me and probably a lot of bit about my businesses.
Yeah. And your social media team does amazing. In fact, I always talk to my team. I'm like, hey, go watch how Autopilot's managing their social media. I want ours to be just like it. So, all right. Well, hey, Al, your time is valuable. I am so grateful that you spent a few minutes with me, man. Powerful stuff about busting up complacency in your business and your agency. It's about tracking. It's about keeping people accountable. It's about just keeping your mind that complacency does kill. And then maybe one of the most important parts is you're going to bust complacency by having the right people in your agency, right? You need to realize that sometimes the wrong crowd delivers the wrong results. If you want different results, surround yourself with a different crowd, and Autopilot can help you to do that. Al, any final thoughts for us today?
Final thought is, first and foremost, thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Second final thought is that book that you showed, the Complacency Kills book, that was written several years back, and it's really for all small business owners, not just insurance agents. But I am in the process of rewriting and re-releasing that book that's going to be specifically for agent team members. So think if all the agents out there, the team members that write across multiple lines for you, I have a book coming out that's tailored just for them. It's going to be a lot of this, and then some new stuff as well. It's called Complacency Kills Insurance Sales. That's going to be out May 13th. So I'm not sure where this is going to air, but May 13th is when that's going to be available on our website and also Amazon.
Man, power. Yeah, check it out. Complacency Kills, whether it's this version or the version that's coming out in May. Hey, listen, I'm a big believer that you ought to buy books. It's fine to go get a book from somewhere, right? But you're supporting the author. And I want to tell you something. I'm a big believer that which you don't invest in is not important to you. And so go pick up this book. It's worth the investment. It's an easy read. I probably consumed it, Al, in, I don't know, probably 4 settings, something like that. Worth my time. It also set up what I wanted to talk about in this podcast. Al, thanks again for your time. I mean, we are really, really grateful. And again, thanks again for your service to our country. I'm grateful.
You're welcome. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, brother. Hey, that's going to be it for episode number 16 of To the Front. Again, big special thank you to my guest, Alex Shattuck. Go check him out at Autopilot Recruiting. And I can't wait till episode number 17. We're going to be drill down a little bit more into your agency. We're going to talk about coaching. It's going to be an episode that you do not want to miss. So until next time, bust up complacency. If you're not growing, you're dying, go after it. It's worth it. Make an impact. That's what life's all about. And until next time, see you later on To the Front.